Iowa's specials are special. Again, maybe the best in the nation. We will discuss. And also taking football to the basketball brackets. What would the Hawkeyes look like against some other teams from conferences across the nation that they rarely see in a football matchup, much like the men's and women's tournaments that we see? Because, of course, it's March Madness. Welcome to Hawkeyes Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Corey Brada right next to me, of course, makes this show roll for us every Tuesday at 4:45 Central Time. Typically 4:30, but we appreciate you stopping by. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. Corey, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's a newsy week, and spring ball is right around the corner. But normally this time of year, if you're covering the basketball front, you're hoping you're talking about your team's chances in the tournament. We're talking about that for the women. They're in a pretty good place. Should have a challenging path to the second weekend, but not insurmountable. And on the men's front, it's rebuild mode. We haven't been in this mode for 15 years, so it's weird. I mean, I don't know if it was. I think it was Pat McAfee. One of these shows was talking about how unique Iowa is in the sense that we've talked about it, but the fact that you have a 25-year head football coach and a 15-year men's basketball coach, and then on the women's side, Lisa Bluter, she'd been there a couple of decades. I'd have to go back and look to see. And now, of course, she retires, but her right-hand woman, Jan Jensen, takes the program over. So there was never a coaching search, and it's just sort of it's just a unique situation. So Fran getting the boot, we don't have to turn this into a basketball show, but it's something that I thought was going to happen. I thought should happen. I stand by that. There's some various reports out there right now about the position. Darian DeVries is a hot name. You probably recognize that name because his brother Jared DeVries is a great football player at Iowa. And Darian is currently the head coach at West Virginia, but he just got hired there last year after making Drake a power in the Missouri Valley Conference. So there was this perception that he was the dream fit and that Iowa was his dream school, but now there's connections to Indiana. Of course, they are looking for somebody after giving Mike Woodson the boot, and Indiana's a blue blood. So NIL is a big deal. Iowa doesn't have a whole lot of support on the basketball side. Everything goes to football, and even more so, I don't know what Iowa women's basketball has at its disposal, but my guess is it's better than the men substantially. I know there's numbers that have been thrown around there, but when we're selling out every women's basketball game right now, and you can't get half the stadium full for men's basketball, that tells the story. So anyways, it's a busy week, but hey, it's fun. I'm glad that we don't have boring off seasons because you and I wouldn't have jobs. Let's say that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun. And this is kind of a fun exercise here because everybody gets into March Madness. Almost everyone. I know that's a little hyperbole there to a certain extent. I certainly have a collection of friends who don't care about it. But generally, if you're a sports fan, you get into March Madness, and I did for decades. And of course, part of that is your bracket and filling out the bracket and either just being fun and thinking, I hope this happens, and I'm going to list it out like that, or I'm taking this seriously, and this is my bracket of integrity, and I'm trying to find the winner and trying to find those upsets and so forth and so on. So on the football side, there's a couple sites, one by the name of ESPN, the other one College Football News, that put together a football deal of this variety. And so we will look at this. So College Football News, I kind of formulated this myself. They didn't do it, but they ranked all the teams 1 through 136. So just doing the math and doing the setup of the brackets, if you take 1 versus 64, 2 versus 63, etc., where do you think College Football News has Iowa ranked, not at the conclusion of 2024, but projecting toward 2025?
Overall seed? Are you talking about
overall seed? Just their ranking of Iowa preseason this year.
Out of 130?
Yes.
Well, that's I would think that they're probably out of 130 teams, and how many of those are G5? I'll say 30.
You were on it. 30. No. You're not on it. 26. They've got Iowa projected as number 26 in the country going into 2025. Let me see what they ranked them at the end of. What do you think they ranked them for their 8-5 finish last year?
Yeah, I'll go 38.
They ranked them number 25 in the country.
Based on what?
I don't know.
Based on what? Losing to an undermanned Missouri team? I mean, with all due respect, I mean, we were all. I don't think that was that.
Wow.
That surprises me. This is sporting news. Is that what you said?
No,
sporting
this is college football news.
College football.
Our buddy,
all right.
Pete Fytak. I've had him on a couple times.
Yeah.
Seems like a great guy. Otherwise, yeah, they love just throwing out like rankings constantly and schedule analysis. So they don't explain any of this. It's just a ranking. But this is quite curious. Okay, 2024 record 8-5. Their preseason spring ranking in 2024 was number 20. Then they ranked Iowa number 25 preseason going into last year. Their final ranking was 25. And then they're ranking them 26 going into this season. Now, I was just going through this on the show that I just completed, but I was not really analyzing it. I was just trying to do these little football matchups. And what struck me, and after I started to look at these rankings, I thought maybe I'm going to produce a video and just tear this thing to shreds because it's pretty bad. Like, for example, Pitt was not a good football team last year. They finished 7-6. They lost their last 6 games. They did not beat anyone of consequence. They had them at number 44. They had Rutgers, not calling Rutgers some great team, but in a much better conference. Same record, 7-6, barely lost by a field goal, a last-second play to Kansas State in their bowl game. Beat some decent teams like Minnesota, Washington, had them 7 spots behind Pitt. Yeah, so this is college football news.
It's that time of year where seeding is, everybody's talking about seeding because you just had conference tournaments, then you have March Madness, and now we're going to be talking about the biggest upsets if there was college football March Madness. What have they been? Everybody brings up the Appalachian State Michigan upset. Where is that on your all-time list of upsets? Because growing up, that was always what people said to me. I always heard that was the game, the upset, at least in Big Ten country.
Well, also because you're talking about an FCS team at the time, then you're talking about an all-time blue blood, and they were ranked number 5 in the country preseason. And that Michigan team was a really good team. They finished fine. They beat Tim Tebow in Florida in the Citrus Bowl that year. So they were not a bad football team. They went 9-4. From a point spread standpoint, Pete Carroll and his great USC team at the conclusion of his great run lost to Stanford when Jim Harbaugh was just getting there at Stanford and just starting to elevate them. And before anyone knew that they were going to be any good, they were a 41-point underdog.
Ooh.
And pulled off an upset against USC in 2009.
41. How are you a 41-point underdog in a conference game? Is Ohio State ever a 41-point favorite over Rutgers? Are they 41? Man,
Maryland, Rutgers.
I don't pay attention to the spreads.
Northwestern.
41?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
It's sick. But they never lose those games. I mean,
they were a 30-point favorite against a good Iowa team.
I know, and that shocked me.
Conference championship game.
But I mean, they don't lose those games. So that's why I say that's got to be one of the biggest spread upsets of all time. 41 and
it is.
Those spreads happen, so you can't blame the people who are setting the numbers.
Yeah. So that's an Iowa scenario in which at number 26, they would play the 37 seed, which is Baylor out of the Big 12. They went 8-5 last year. They lost to LSU in a bowl game. I think Iowa wins that game. I've got a little respect for Big 12 football.
I thought Iowa would win the Missouri game with the number of guys that Missouri had out, but they still hurt Iowa through the air. And anyways,
who missed the game for Iowa?
Who missed the game for Iowa? Well, you'd have to ask me that.
After the game.
Almost everybody played. I believe Jamari was out. Jamari Harris was out. Who else was out of that game? Somebody in the channel. Seems like so long ago. I know Missouri had their top receiver out, and then their second guy killed him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I know Lachey played. Caleb Johnson was out. Kelvin says, "Man, I don't even remember that." I don't even remember that. The basketball season fries my brain to where I lose short-term memory. I can still remember things deep into the past, but the fact that I couldn't remember if Caleb Johnson played. But yeah, Caleb Johnson, Jamari Harris, and then there might have been maybe one other guy. But most guys were, I mean, the linebackers played, Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, and Sebastian Castro played. Trying to think of other guys who were headed to the league. Of course, Logan Jones played because he's coming back anyways. But yeah, it's CD3. Yeah, Bobby. Hooper DeJean did not play. He was getting ready to play in a much bigger game about a month later. So
ESPN did something more elaborate where they took what they consider to be the top 64 teams in the country. And I have Iowa's seeding, but they actually are playing out the games. And this guy, Chris Lowe, is writing paragraphs on what would have happened if Georgia and Iowa State were playing. I cannot find the Iowa result, but if we're just looking at seedings, they have the Iowa football team. I guess this is going into 2025 as a 6 seed. So it's one of the 24 best teams in the country. And they have them, the 11 seeds, since I can't find the game matchup, the 11 seeds are Kentucky, Virginia Tech. We've seen Kentucky a few times against Iowa, of course. Kentucky, Virginia Tech, Wisconsin, and Vanderbilt are the 11 seeds.
Vanderbilt would be that would be an intriguing one. I'm
exactly.
Yeah.
That was my thought as well, that I think that that's the worst matchup for Iowa. Not that they wouldn't win the game, but Vandy would be a little scary. We know that they were much better than Wisconsin.
By the way, when you want to get I know it's in our title of our video, but people have asked, I see Kelvin earlier, what's the deep dive on OMAR Young?
Okay.
I want to get your opinion on this because I've tried to dive deep into OMAR Young. We've not gotten any that I'm aware of any access to him yet as far as press availability. But I do want to talk about this because his resume is an interesting one. I'd have to think it's either a very strong Kurt connection or a very strong Tim Lester connection. And I know there's theories on both ends, but he's not a guy I had any radar on. So I'll be interested to get your 2 cents on that hire.
All right, we will get to that in 30 seconds after we remind everyone, please hit the like button and please subscribe here at the Voice of College Football. It's easy to do. That's the 2-step process. And shoot, by the way, you might as well get out there and let people know that we're here every Tuesday with Corey. Final score from the NCAA football tournament, 64-team field. 11 seed Virginia Tech defeats Iowa 17-14. It's been a frustrating tournament for number 6 seeds. This time the Hawkeyes go down, and once again, they simply can't muster enough offense to help a stingy defense. Brent Pry and the Hokies get their biggest win of the season in his 4th year in the program, and I am calling that complete garbage. Iowa is not losing to Virginia Tech.
But again, what is this based on other than just trying to create a March Madness scenario?
Yeah. And it's not like it's impossible that Iowa could lose to Virginia Tech, but no, Virginia Tech is not a good football team. Forget that. No. Iowa wins over Virginia Tech 23-10.
So do they basically have almost every Power 5 team in the field then?
Yeah, there's a Tulane and a Boise State. They throw a few of those in there.
But that's not real. I mean, obviously there's more G5 non-Power 4 teams on the basketball side they get in.
Oh, sure.
Because there's more conferences, etc. But it almost doesn't make sense to do that way, just to rank your teams 1 through 130 and then have the top. Because if it's set up like March Madness, you'd have representatives from every single non-Power 4 conference.
Sure. Yeah.
And you wouldn't like that, right? Traditionalist in you wouldn't like that.
You mean I would want the power conferences to dominate?
You didn't think that SMU was deserving, right? You didn't think SMU was deserving.
No,
I
didn't have an issue with that.
Boise State was deserving.
No, I did not have an issue with that.
You didn't have an issue with that?
I did not have an issue with that. I think we
Oh.
will have an issue upcoming. This was a pretty that Boise State team represented well. They played Penn State fine. I was okay with that. And I thought that they would play that game fairly close. No, but we will see seasons in the future as we would have in the past where those teams will get completely trucked.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that's fine. And look, Mark, here's the thing about, so does that make, again, I go back to this. Does it mean that you just, from a holistic standpoint, traditionalist standpoint, you like college football being different? Because I had the same topic of this conversation with a college basketball person the other day that was talking about, I don't know if we were talking about automatic bids going to small schools, but you know how many blowouts there are usually in the NCAA tournament with 116 games? It's going to happen.
Sure.
So I don't have an issue with, I like the idea of a little guy getting in.
Oh, I do too, except in football, there's such limited entries. In basketball, you can't make, what are we up to, 72 teams? And I know that there's
68.
like
68.
Yeah, but there are 8 teams that play,
Yeah.
correct?
There are 68 teams. There are
I'm out.
4. I'm just telling you the truth. There's 4 play-in games. So that's 4 additional teams to the 64 team field. That's how it works.
They had to beat other teams. So there's
68 teams.
So
there's
outside
60,
of timeout.
There's 64. I can tell it. I can explain it to you if you let me explain it to you.
Okay.
There's 64 teams in the first round, Mark. 64. Okay. 4 first round teams.
4 lost.
4 teams lost in playing.
I got you. All right. I'm with you. 68. Okay.
We're on the same page now.
Yeah, we are. All right, 68-72. What's it matter? That's a lot of teams.
It's a lot of teams.
But we're also drawing from about 300, right?
350.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. That's a different sport. No, I have no issue with providing one spot for the group of 5, even though that team is typically about the 25th to 40th best team in the country. They're not the 12th best team in the country. Boise State this year, that was different. And that's once every 5 years or so. All right. So Omar Young is the running backs coach, and he's got a good group to work with. And your thoughts about his post?
His post or his credentials?
His credentials, sure.
I don't know anything about. I mean, look, I've done as deep of a dive as I can do without being able to talk to the staff and being able to talk to him. He's got a pretty pedestrian resume, if you ask me. All right, I'll just say that right now. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I know a lot of people want to celebrate whenever a new coach gets hired. Like when Abdul Hodge came back. Oh, he's a great Hawkeye, and he'd never coached tight ends. I was a little bit speculative on it, right? Omar Young, and I would credit SB Nation on this because I know a lot of beat writers don't probably take the time to, not that they need to, they run through a resume and that's what they do. But I do appreciate SB Nation for running through sort of the ins and outs of what he did at each stop, because I think that was the question when Iowa released a statement on Omar Young's hiring. I'm like, okay, is he coached running backs? Why is he jumping around so much? Well, here's the reality. And again, credit to SB Nation for kind of disseminating some of this information to make it a little easier for people to grab. Last year, Young was on the Patriots staff. That team went 4-13. Okay. Is it Gerard or Jared Mayo? I don't even know his first name. Gerard Mayo got fired after 4-13. And I guess Omar Young was gone with him. I know he coached, was it the Senior Bowl earlier this year? Or was it the Senior Bowl or was it the man, now I'm drawing a blank. It was it was the Senior Bowl. What am I thinking? I was thinking there was a different game. He coached the Senior Bowl. He coached running backs at the Senior Bowl. But prior to him coaching running backs for the Patriots, he was an assistant QB / receivers coach. So he was a passing game guy, assistant passing game guy with the Bears. And he did spend time in the college ranks. He was running backs coach for Eastern Illinois during a stretch where they went 3-26 and their head coach was fired. He was a running backs quality control analyst for the Packers, and he was a running back analyst for South Carolina and a running backs offensive assistant for the Browns in 2015. So, and he also coached for the Colorado back, I think, 2013, 2014. He was a defense and special teams quality control guy.
Yeah.
So, I'm just saying that's not some grandiose resume, Mark, but I'm not going to sit here and denounce the hire like 5 days in. I haven't even talked to the guy. I really don't know much more about other than the black and white, where he's been, what he's done. It just seems like a pretty big jump. But with that being said, maybe he's gotten a flying. Again, I don't know if this is a stronger connection to Kirk. There's a couple NFL teams where he's been on staff that Kirk has strong connections to. The Patriots being one, of course, although Belichick's no longer there, and the other being the Browns. And of course, Ferentz coached there a long time ago. Tim Lester obviously was with the Packers. It was he was there well after Omar Young was in Green Bay. And I'm sure there's lots of Iowa, Chicago Bears connections. So I see the comment here in the chat. It's a lazy, typical Kirk hire. I don't necessarily agree with that because it's too early. It's too early to say. Obviously, somebody endorsed this guy, or I don't know. I mean, had you ever heard the name Omar Young, Mark?
It sounds familiar. Have you looked into his playing days?
I can't find his playing days.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe
I can't even find a Wikipedia page for the guy.
All right. Well, then
I mean, yeah. I'm not saying he was. Maybe he was a really good player. What does it say? If you keep scrolling
just about
down,
everybody's got a Wikipedia page these days. I'm surprised you don't have one.
Well, I was going to say, don't you have one? And if you don't, why haven't we started one? Voice of College Football at Wikipedia, or Wikipedia at the Voice of College Football. So I don't know. I mean, hey, the great news is we're probably going to get. I'm assuming they're going to make him available during spring ball, and a lot of these questions can be had. But I don't believe anybody's gotten access to Omar Young for an interview yet. But I would assume this is a bump up for him. Again, I don't even know if he officially the Patriot. I believe he was the Patriots running backs coach. No, I'm sorry. He was technically labeled as a coaching assistant from what I'm seeing with the Patriots. So I'm trying to recall when I looked at his resume, when the last time he actually was the running backs coach anywhere. And that doesn't necessarily mean anything that he's got that title where he's been. I know he was running backs coach at Eastern Illinois a long time ago, but he wasn't even the running backs coach at the Patriots, and the staff got fired. So again, someone knows something I don't, because I don't know anything else. By the way, James and everybody in the chat, yes, I see your comment about everybody's talking about Iowa basketball. Darian DeVries apparently took the job at Indiana. There's been rumblings all day about that. So I believe you. Yes, it's a football show. I acknowledge what you're saying, but yes, it was announced just moments ago. So thank you for Darian DeVries is off the board if you're coming here to talk about Iowa basketball.
So in terms of Omar Young, of course, we're not just going to take the teams that he is associated with and look at their records and lack of success, because it's pretty abysmal, and tie that directly to him. He's one guy who's an analyst at a lot of these stops, a running backs coach, as you just mentioned, at Eastern Illinois. It is difficult to go 3-26. That doesn't happen very often. Goodness gracious.
3-26 at Eastern Illinois.
Yeah. The Browns were horrible in 2015. I think in 2016, they had the team that went 0-16 that year. So they were like 2-14 that year. South Carolina running back analyst. I didn't even know that there was such a thing. Running back analyst.
So am I making too much of I'm not trying to. I'm just acknowledging that I don't know. I've had people, what do you know about Omar Young? I know nothing about Omar Young. You say, well, reach out to your sources. I don't have any Omar Young sources. I'll just admit I have no Omar Young sources. I mean, I can ask people within the program, but they're not the ones who. This comes from the top down. This is a Kirk / Tim Lester decision. I doubt anybody else had any say in this. I would be shocked if there's some connection to another person on staff, because a guy with this level of resume or lack thereof, there's got to be something or someone behind the scenes that we don't know about. So I'm sure there would have been other people that have better resumes on paper than Omar Young.
Yeah.
And he's not an Iowa guy. I don't know that he's got any connections to Iowa. So, yeah, this one's surprising. I'd be curious to know who else they hired, interviewed.
Kirk says that Omar Young has a track record of building deep relationships with his players at every level and guiding them to success on and off the field. I would love to see the rushing statistics from these running back groups.
Is that an implication that he's not had much success, Mark? Is that what you're implying? I mean, the teams haven't had much success. I don't know if you run the ball well, your team plays well. Typically.
All right.
Are we off that subject?
Have you posted a video?
No, I haven't posted a video yet. I don't know what to say. I'll talk. Listen, I'm going to post a video once I can get in touch with somebody who has something to say about Omar Young. But I'm not just going to go on a video and read the press release and his resume and be like, well, I don't know if the guy sucks or not. Like, I'm not going to do that. So once I hear something on Omar Young, once this week calms down, I'll post a video.
Well, I know that you're into basketball, but obviously the men are out. Other than I'm guessing they're playing in the NIT.
No. And by the way, I know you don't follow college basketball, but now the Big Ten has this thing called the Crown, all because of TV deals. So they have their own tournament that's separate from the NIT.
What?
It's just, you read about it later. It's not just the Big Ten. It's a couple different conferences. They're teaming up with the TV networks, and it's all stupid. They bowed out of the Crown. They would have been in the Crown, but they don't have enough players, because when you lose your coach, people start entering the portal, and you have to have 7 scholarship guys to qualify for postseason play.
So this is what I suggested you do, thinking, as we mentioned some videos, as I asked about an Omar Young video. So I mentioned to you this at the time about Caden Proctor and what he said about Iowa. Did you ever put together a video on what Caden Proctor said?
No, I did not. You did, though.
Yes,
I saw you did. And did it do pretty well?
Let's see. It did. Dick, we're at 3,400 views.
Okay, that's not bad.
But you know what? You should have done. Oh, I thought you could see all that. Anyway, you should have been the one. You could do a much better video than I could talking about Caden Proctor in Iowa.
There's a long off season ahead, Mark. And I don't think this is. I know, but this isn't one of those stories that. I don't think this. Yeah, but this isn't one of those stories that ages very fast. I don't think, because to me, this is if this is something that is bulletin board material for Iowa, and I don't think it is. I really don't. I just don't think that's how Kirk and this staff operates. But if it was, this would be up there all off season and would be a calling card for 25. I don't think they have. This is not an aspiration. You and I have talked about this. We have talked about Iowa and Kirk not talking about national titles.
I talk about that.
I talk about it. I talk about it all the time. I don't ever hear the word.
No, but I talk about us talking about it. Yes.
And by the way, Caden Proctor didn't even have to say national championship. All he would have had to say is playoff. I don't hear Iowa talk about the playoff. I don't hear that. I don't even. I really don't. And I'm not on the inside every day, but when we've had access to them, I don't know that I've ever heard Kirk Ferentz bring that up on his own accord.
The players being as good as they are in most pockets, we saw the linebacking core last year, the secondary, the Cooper DeJeans of the world, et cetera, et cetera. Those guys have to talk about it and think about it. They're too good not to.
Cade talked about it. I remember Cade. I asked Cade specifically about it his first year at Iowa, and I think he said that he and Cooper have talked about it. I may have even asked Cooper that, but doesn't it have to come from the head coach at some point? Like, don't you to have a culture that's stable and that's, yeah, I just think it has to come from higher up than even your best players. If your coach doesn't believe, why should the rest of the players?
Who is this? Thor.
Thor.
This is what happens when you host a show, you produce a show, you charge at the graphics. I just throwing stuff up there. You can certainly subscribe to the Oklahoma channel. Yes, we've got a fine show there on Monday night with Chad and Tyranny. So anyway, we will get that switched out for you. The special teams this year, from what I'm looking at, punter back, field goal kicker back, best return man in the nation back. Wow.
Once again, probably the best unit in the Big Ten. I mean, I don't know how you can argue against it. And it was Reese Dakin's first year last year. I thought he improved as the year went on, but I think he can get better. And Drew Stevens is set. I mean, I know, hey, all these guys on the special, every one of those guys probably could have left and gone somewhere, not necessarily all the NFL. I don't know what Drew's stock would have been in the league, but guys are getting poached from every school now. If you have halfway decent numbers at any level, you're getting poached. So I guarantee you, all three of those guys have had offers and opportunities to go elsewhere. Now, Caden Weegan wasn't going to play in the league, but there's plenty of schools, even the Blue Bloods, that would have probably loved to have given Caden Weegan a scholarship just to be their return guy. He was that good. He was the best return guy in the country. And Drew Stevens, by the numbers, man, they tested him more from 50 plus than I would have ever expected. And he really didn't miss anything from inside of 50. So I'm anxious to see, obviously, the offense being better sometimes takes away from the kicking needs to some extent. But he's a special kicker. He's a special player. He's coming off of an injury. My understanding is that he got dinged up a little bit during winter conditioning. But I think he's back up to speed now in advance of spring practice. I think the bigger question for special teams, Mark, is going to be depth. Who's the backup kicker? Of course, they lost their backup during this past season. He kind of got poached. I laugh about that every time I think about Syracuse poaching him off the roster, but that's what happened. And can you have some development behind Caden? I don't know who the next return guy is. He's one of the only guys that really said, "Hey, I'm coming back." He and Logan Jones, I believe. I know Jennings Dunker's back, but we expected him back. He and Logan Jones are really the only guys that shocked me that said they were coming back. Aaron Graves, same thing. But I don't know who the next return guy is. If they can figure out a backup option, and maybe it's a situation where he's probably going to do both. But if they want to get him involved with offense more, maybe you just run him on punt return duties. We've seen a lot of injuries over the past decade with guys returning kicks. There's fewer kicks to be returned anyways. So maybe you have somebody else ready to do that. That would be my question. Could it be a Jalen Watson or maybe a Seth Anderson or someone like that has got some speed? They're obviously two different skills. He's good at both. And I just think depth is the biggest question. But typically Iowa stays healthy at those positions, but return guy would probably be the biggest question mark. And again, as I mentioned, Drew's been dinged up a little bit. It sounds like he's back healthy now.
We hit a big time this afternoon, as we do each and every Monday through Friday on the College Football Show. That's at 4 p.m. Eastern Time or 3 p.m. for you folks in the fine state of Iowa. And we take your calls and we talk college football. And we are going to deliver a heck of a show once we get past March Madness, because we've got all sorts of people that are tied up with basketball that will be appearing as guests each and every day. Again, that's Monday through Friday at 4 Eastern, 3 Central. Reminds me that I've never been to the state of Iowa.
It's a shame.
I
don't know why you've got to get to Kinnick. Like, just come for one. Fly into Cedar Rapids, get 30 miles down the road or less, run over to Kinnick Stadium. It's a cheap flight. You're in Florida. Hey, I've flown to Florida on Allegiant Airlines, very cheap, very inexpensive. Cedar Rapids I've flown into St. Petersburg, but I'm sure Allegiant flies. I'm pretty sure they fly to Orlando, and that's a little closer to you. Daytona, maybe. Does Daytona have a decent sized airport?
Oh, I love the Daytona airport. It's like 10 minutes away. Drive right down the street. It's a straight shot. It's right by the Speedway. And that's where I have flown out of. That's where my children fly in. and it's so incredibly easy. It's great. I don't want to touch Orlando. I didn't expect when I brought that up that I would get a complete rundown of what I should be doing to get to Iowa. But there would have to be a few things in place. Number one, if Iowa would ever play a Thursday or Friday game, that would make that much more doable.
You're gonna fly back before if they get play a Friday night game, you're gonna fly back before Saturday.
Sure, I'll
And
fly
get back
out
and
Saturday morning.
All right.
Number two, obviously, you would need to be available. I'm not going to come all the way up there if you were going to be like
in Florida
doing whatever you're doing. But
hey,
maybe Cyhawk.
I was gonna say they still play Nebraska on Black Friday.
Yeah.
Although flights that time of year, probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
I think rates increase that week in general. So
plus, I don't want to go up there when it's 16 degrees outside.
You've experienced it. You know what it's about.
Oh, absolutely. I've experienced it for a lifetime. I'd like to come up for a nice toasty game against Iowa State.
Yeah, those are toasty usually. That opening weekend has been brutal.
Well, maybe not that then. Maybe like in early October.
Yeah, some of the homecoming games, even Iowa State sometimes get a little bit cooler. Jason says he's talking about Black Friday. We play Friday games every year.
Yeah,
they have been getting another Friday game. Who'd they play this year? I think UCLA, but it wasn't in Kinnick. It was on the road. Did they play 2 Friday games this year? UCLA and let's see. Maryland was Saturday. I'm trying to think if they played another Friday game earlier this year besides UCLA and Nebraska. I don't think they did. Minnesota? No. Jason's saying Nebraska and UCLA.
Yeah. Oddly enough, about 4 or 5 nights ago, I started watching the Iowa-Maryland game.
The women's game?
The football game from the boring football game that they won or 22.
You watched that a couple of nights ago?
I watched about 4 series.
Why?
I was on YouTube TV and I've got all the games for the entire season saved, and I was just like clicking around. All of a sudden, it like automatically started showing it, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna watch a few drives.
So what's nice about, and I'm not gonna. This is your show, so if you want to, edit this out later, you can. But what's nice about YouTube TV, because I have YouTube TV as well. What's nice about YouTube TV is it catalogs everything by team, right?
Yeah.
So you can quickly, no matter what channel, and it does it automatically. So you can go to all Iowa football games, all Iowa women's basketball games, or for you that you're wanting to, I don't know how many it stores, but if you're wanting to watch every single Power 5 team or have everyone at your disposal, pretty simple to do. And I'm sure it goes in alphabetical order, and it's pretty slick when you're doing. It's the perfect thing for someone like you. They'd be a great sponsor. They would be a phenomenal sponsor for someone like you. I'm just saying, if you can find someone, they're very difficult to contact. And the show's on YouTube. This show is on YouTube.
Yeah, you are right. Yeah, I would be a great pitch man for their product. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely.
Oh, by the way, we were talking about this the other day, the start of spring ball. It was announced, wasn't it, the other day, when spring practice begins?
You've completely destroyed our clip, our special teams clip.
I'm sorry. What else?
I don't think we worked through the entire special teams, did we?
Okay, let's pull up the special, since you're going to complain about it. Let's pull up the special teams. Let's pull up the roster. All right. Who do you want to talk about? You want to talk about Gunners? You want to talk about Gunners?
I want to talk about the best return man in college football.
All right. What else is there to say? Caden Weegan won the return man of the year. I think Brevin Dahl has a chance of working into special teams this year. He may be a guy to look for return duties, because I don't know. Who knows what Omar Young? Hey, we can connect these stories. Omar Young's going to be taking over the running backs room, and Brevin Dahl is a running back who's sounds like he's worked some at receiver.
For as good as Aiken is, he's not a Tory Taylor.
Numbers wise, no. But I think he's consistency wise, that's probably where he's got the biggest curve. I think leg strength is pretty close. But I mean, it's hard to. You're talking Tory Taylor may be an all-time great. It's him and Reggie Roby at the top. I don't think there's anybody else in the conversation really for best punter of all time at Iowa. That's how good he was. So it'd hard to duplicate that. But he's got some of the physical traits. He's a big kid. I don't know that he's quite as big as Tory, but he is a big kid. Tory also got here when he was like 24 years old. So, there's a 6-year difference. There's a big gap between an athlete at 18 and an athlete at 24. I think that's a factor. So who knows what, he's been working. He's one of those guys. I'll be curious to see what he looks like this spring. How much did winter help him? And then in the fall, we don't often say that with punters, but I kind of am curious how much weight does Reese Dakin put on from, might be the only time in the history of the show we'll ever talk about monitoring the weight of a punter. But I am sort of curious because of Tory Taylor's physicality that he brought, even as a punter.
Now, this analysis may be horribly skewed because I watch the punting game of all these teams just like I do every other play of the game, but I'm not sitting there with quite the analytical eye. But Tory Taylor is about the best I've ever seen anywhere.
But you watched Reggie Roby back in the day. I mean, he was special. I didn't watch him live.
I don't remember him hitting those kicks at like the 3-yard line like Taylor did over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an unbelievable skill. And it is an unbelievable skill to be able to get kicks. You're talking, I don't know if you're talking about coffin corner.
Yeah.
Punts,
or timing with his special teams unit,
yes,
which is a credit to them as well. All the balls that were caught in the air or on one bounce.
And being able to time that, I think, generation-wise or era-wise with Cooper DeJean, because I think we don't talk about gunners, but if you talk about, he's got to be one of the best gunners of all time at Iowa. And I don't even know the Eagles are using him in that manner. I would hope they are. Gary Close could probably tell us, but whatever they're doing, it worked because they're Super Bowl champions. But boy, his skills as a gunner were unbelievable as well. Do you still abide by the fact that it was that you think this was an illegal, invalid signal? Do you still abide by that?
Who said I abided by that?
You argued after that whole thing happened, you sort of argued that he shouldn't have been waving his hand.
I didn't get it. I just said, what is he doing?
He was running towards the ball.
Like this?
Yes. He wasn't running like this. Nobody's going to run towards the ball.
I don't believe it should have been called.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly the argument or lack thereof that we had. I know that I did provide some pushback. It was
a little odd, but it should have never been called back. Nobody on the field, nobody on the sidelines, nobody in the stadium thought it was a fair catch. Nobody, including Minnesota. The fact that they had to go back and review it is disgraceful, that you would go back and review that and call it that way.
And had he ran the ball out at the 1-yard line, it may not have been reviewed.
It wouldn't have been. You and I both know it wouldn't have been. Well, no, I'm even thinking if he had just ran the ball out right where he caught it, they wouldn't have gone back and reviewed it.
Well, regardless, I'm just making the point that if it was a non-scoring play.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even know how it's I still don't know how it's reviewable. Just because he scored a touchdown.
They review every scoring play.
That's stupid.
No,
that is stupid.
That's just a rule. A guy could be plunging in from the 1-yard line. They just review it.
It's a stupid rule. It is a stupid rule. Just like if a guy ran 98 yards down the field and dropped at the 1, they're not going to review that. But if he runs 99 yards and goes to the end zone, we're going to review that. That's stupid. That is, it's stupid. It's stupid.
I understand the premise that they want to ensure that they're not screwing up a play that ended up in a touchdown.
A 98-yard play is responsible for the touchdown that happens on the following play. You and I both know that.
Well, yeah, but you can't regulate that. Okay, we're going to do every play over 20 yards or 30 yards, but not.
You can't? Well, then why are we doing it with touchdowns? Why can't you regulate
the same thing about an 18-yard pass down to the 1-yard line? How important was that? Well, it seems pretty important.
Right. So either review it or don't. I don't believe that you review scoring plays. I think there should be a premise in place for any play. If something meets a certain criteria, it can be reviewed at any point in the game or
You're being pretty vague.
Final two.
What criteria? A certain criteria.
certain criteria, but D. Rollison says I'm triggering him. The bottom line is there's no way you can possibly call that a fair catch, and there's no way it should have been reviewed in the first place. But my whole point is we shouldn't be reviewing every scoring play. If we're not able to review other massive plays like a 98-yard catch and duck out at the 1 yard line, you should not just have some arbitrary rule that says we're reviewing every single scoring play. A guy runs it in from the half-yard line, clearly is in, and we're going to look at it just to make sure, and we didn't review the 98-yard pass play the play before. What sense does that make?
When you make rules sometimes, Corey, I think you will agree with this. You don't have the advantage of seeing into the future. You have to make the rule as applicable as possible. You can't say, well, officials determine, was that 18-yard pass important, or was that 7-yard run important or not important? You can't
Well, I'll tell you this. We can talk about that aspect of the rule, but we can also talk about how reviewing a fair catch is even reviewable when it wasn't called on the field of play. Why is that an aspect of a scoring play that can be reviewed? Because I know there was the example of was it a North Carolina guy a couple of years prior that had been called for an invalid signal, or maybe it was Wisconsin. One of those. It was a game, Power 4 game, and I remember looking at that after the fact. But that wasn't a scoring play, but it was called an invalid signal on the field, if I recall. So I don't know did we ever get clearance, or did that ever get established why that was even a reviewable aspect of a play? Because typically you can't go back and call a flag on. It's like you can't go back if there was a pass interference on the play, Mark.
Yeah,
a guy catches a ball and is actually pushing off. The officials can't go back later after calling it a touchdown and say, well, it was actually an offensive pass interference after a review. You see how stupid that is? You see how dumb that is? It's a judgment call in the moment. And if you don't call it that way on the field, you don't go back and review it later. It's not like a goaltend in basketball or basket interference. That's not what this is. Either change the premise of the rule, be very specific with each situation, which is difficult to do, I acknowledge, or just say we cannot go back and call a flag on a judgment call after the fact. That's just ridiculous. I don't care if it's a scoring play or not.
I'm not capable of coming up with the correct term to differentiate judgment calls here, but I don't consider that like a left tackle made a hold on a pass play that you can say on a, we obviously, I think we can all agree we don't want officials going back on any play or scoring plays and making judgment calls on pass interference or holding calls or anything like that.
What's the difference? What is the difference? If everybody kept playing, what's the difference going back and saying, okay, how much was he moving his arm? How high from his waist was it? What is the difference with reviewing that versus reviewing how much a guy was wrapped around somebody's shoulder pads, or how much a guy pushed off? And okay, was there hand checking? Did the defender turn his head? Like, what's the difference? Judgment call wise, what's the difference?
Everything would be a judgment call excluding offsides.
Okay.
And what else?
Well, they are. That's why you don't go back and review judgment calls.
Has some level of judgment call, except for, offsides, illegal procedure, any kind of motion penalty. That's not a judgment call. It can be clearly seen and determined. But everything else is there's a gray area of holding penalties, of pass interference penalties, where there's a threshold for that individual official.
So I still don't understand how you can go back and review a penalty. I don't understand. A non-penalty. A non-called penalty. I don't even particularly like it when I see a call in football, and this happened a lot this year. When I see a call in football, a flag thrown, and they show the replay on the television screen right away, and you're like, okay, yeah, it's there, but, and then they say the flag was picked up. There is no foul for illegal block in the back. It's like, you threw the flag. It's not like you like the flag fell out of your pocket. You called it. You threw the flag because you saw something. And then for some reason, maybe you want to say another referee saw it from a better angle, but you've decided, never mind. It wasn't enough. Like, no, that's not how this should work.
Okay, I don't necessarily agree with that. I do agree. Hang on. It does sound funny when an official says there is no foul for such and such, because obviously they're acknowledging somebody saw
Yeah.
whatever I'm just
Unless it's
stating.
something like grounding where they make an explanation, the passer was outside the pocket or whatever it is. If
Sure.
there's an explanation that they clearly got from another official, like, no, he was here. Okay, you saw it wrong. That's fine. But you can't decide, like, let me go back in my memory 5 seconds. Oh, I saw that wrong. Now that I see it in my head, I saw that wrong. So I'm going to change the call. Like, you saw what you saw. It moved you to make a call. Don't be picking up the flag, because it just loses, to me, you lose trustworthiness at that point.
All right.
You lose credibility.
We've got Drew Lipson. Still love your guys. Talk Hawk ball in the winter. Looking forward to the Hawk women's run in the tournament sent. LGH.
What does that mean? Tournament sent.
I think it's a typo, but I thought I'd
You'd read it like it was, because it's a super chat. That's what he wanted read, Mark.
LGH. What does that stand for?
Let's go Hawks.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why we have to use. I see people. No offense to you, Rollison, but it seems like a cheap knockoff of GBR, and I kind of get torqued that we have to have a. I'm pretty sure GBR was around before LGH. The fact that you had to ask what LGH is, that's an indicator.
I'm sure I could have figured it out. I did state on the previous show that I was one of my pet teams that I root for secretly.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
But I put that entire collection of the Big Ten West in there, excluding Nebraska. I've got some soft spot in my heart for Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin.
Why not Nebraska? Because why not Nebraska? Did they hurt you?
Minnesota. They're a latecomer to the Big Ten.
So so it's not a matter of them like hurting you in the 90s or something?
Yeah, no.
Okay. You didn't care about them?
And also UCLA. Got a soft spot for UCLA.
Really? Okay. All right.
I don't know why.
It's because of that it's because of that press conference preseason last year.
No. This goes way back.
I've never seen a head coach get up before the media and literally have no idea what he's going to say in a press conference that he'd known was coming for months.
Yeah, I wait till something, negative happens, or he's got to face some kind of situation, NCAA situation or something.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here. We're going to wrap it up for the night. Corey, when is the next live show? I guess the women get together, on Wednesday or on Thursday or Friday, I would assume.
So actually the women's format is Friday, Saturday for first round, Sunday, Monday. So they kind of offset the men. Plan is to try to get a live stream in tomorrow. Still working out scheduling with Kashin, but we'll have Kashin Alexander on to talk about the bracket, the draw, and of course the first round matchup and the potential second round matchup against Oklahoma. So people can lock in over it from the Hawkeye of the Storm. I did post a video here a little bit ago. Kylie Feuerbach has announced she's returning for her 6th year. So that's big news for the backcourt. And so people can check that out. And yeah, I mean, we've got lots of stuff coming for March Madness, and of course the coaching search. When I've had people ask me, what are your 2 cents? I'm like, hey, the AD has kept this very close to the vest, and now that Darian DeVries is off the board, it's probably on to Ben McCollum at Drake. But if not Ben, then I don't have a lot of questions. There's going to be question marks until whoever. Now that DeVries is off the bench, it's whoever wins the quickest. I mean, it's whoever can win the quickest, because the fan base is at an all-time high as it relates to apathy. I don't think we've seen this, at least in the last 4 decades. And so we'll keep everybody posted over on the channel when we get an announcement or something concrete, some report that's concrete. We'll talk about it. But yeah, in the meantime, keep it locked for Iowa women's hoops coverage for March. And then, of course, as we hit spring football.
Folks, if you love football recruiting, you can get your Tuesday kicked off here at the Voice of College Football with our Tuesday 1 p.m. Eastern Time recruiting show, On the Move. And we do that each and every Tuesday. It's a great show. We had the number 1 cornerback in the transfer portal on today. And we had a top 150 commit on today as well.
You had the number one player in the transfer portal on your show?
The number one cornerback.
Cornerback. I think it's quarterback.
Who's visiting Michigan State and Purdue this week.
Why doesn't Iowa have him on?
Rashad Williams. And he's also going to Ole Miss and Wake Forest.
Okay, good stuff. And that's you and
Leanne Herring. And we do a Tuesday show. She gets us some great guests. Those are all her contacts. Yes.
Good stuff.
All right. Lock it in with Corey for women's hoops post game. And of course, the pregame show that he just outlined. So lock it in and we will see you next Tuesday.